Hi everyone, and thank you for watching Two Broke Guys. This is a video about making a denim patch quilt. I was supposed to get this video out to you way at the beginning around the pandemic, and that is not what happened. Ran into all kinds of issues. Please watch the whole thing before deciding if this is a method that you'd like to use to make a quilt. Hope everyone's been safe, and thank you very much for watching. And thank you to all subscribers. Please take care.
Hello guys, welcome to Two Broke Guys. So, as you well know, a lot of us are quarantined. And in the time being, there are certain things that we might be doing to occupy ourselves or, abide the time. I've decided to work on my second quilt. I by no means am a professional quilter at all. I actually am self-taught. I dived into it and I would like to go through a few things, show you some things that I've learned, and maybe you could share a few things with me. Again, I am not a professional quilter. I know very little about it, but here's what I have learned. What I'd like to show you right now is how to cut open your jeans. See this seam right here, you're going to want to follow that. It just makes it a lot easier. You can go on either side, but I like to choose right here. Just get through that stitching right there and then follow it all the way up. And if you wind up on the other side like I just did, that's okay too. Just make sure you stay on the seam. Sometimes that happens. And then when you get all the way up to the very top right here, just keep going. So I'm just going to stop there. Take your CD case, put it right there. See how I drew one right here? You get as close to the edge as you possibly can. And then put your next one right above it, or at least around it, because you want to save as much fabric as you can. And then take your pen. I like to use a pen. Make sure that you are marking it and that the pen is working properly, because you don't want to lift up your case and then find out that you didn't get a dark enough line. There we go. There's something to follow right there. You can use a marker if you'd like, if you prefer that, because it's darker, but I just prefer a thinner line. I like to do denim and different kinds of plaid. This is a vintage plaid right here. It was actually just a piece of material that I used for a coffee, not a coffee table, but a coffee, a tablecloth. Sorry, I can't. I've only had my second cup of coffee this morning. And what I like to do, because the material is so thin, is I used a CD case, and these are the size of approximately a CD. I just traced around it. And the thinner material right here, I always back up with a piece of denim, a piece of thick denim, because the material is so thin that you don't want it to wear thin during your quilt. You know, you see quilts that have gone through time and they start to rub real thin right here and get holy. And then I took some stitching on you can use any different type of stitching you want, like thick or small, but I used a thinner one right here because I thought it was a little bit classier. Again, my X's are not perfect. Nothing about this quilt will be extremely perfect. It'll have a country look, but it's not going to be one of those beautiful quilts that you see hanging on the walls or at an art gallery. I'm aware of that. But, so to keep it together real well, I had made a smaller stitching right here, because I like the way that looks. And then I'll go through some steps and show you on the sewing machine some of those things. Also, when we go to make the quilt and the backing's put onto the quilt, this is around the area where we're going to put the ties to make it an official quilt, because every quilt's got to have the ties, I believe anyway. As I mentioned before, there is the DVD case. Yes, the good old DVD. I thought it was a great size for a square. I didn't want too large. You know how you have the really large squares, and which would make your quilt go a lot faster, granted, but I wanted a smaller quilt. And then they're smaller than this, of course. But I thought, for me, for someone who's just starting off, kind of, this is perfect. And yes, I love Nirvana. Kurt Cobain is one of my favorite singers. But, so here's a piece of jean material right here. Just, you flip your jean, you know, you used to use old jeans or whatever you can. Of course, the thicker the material, the better. You don't want to use thin jeans, and I do have some of those just for backing so I don't, you know, waste anything, and it makes it a little bit thicker. But you take this, of course, I'll have to trim that off right there, and then you sew it, and I'll show you how and what stitching that I use. This is my vintage sewing machine. She's my old girl. I've not really worked with a newer sewing machine. I think it would be nice to have one for a backup, but this is my friend, and she's grumpy, but I know her. And if you use an old sewing machine, you know what I'm talking about. You build a relationship with them, and she bickers at me, but we've got each other's back for the most part, and hopefully it stays that way. Okay, so I'm just gonna demonstrate right now what I'm going to do. This right here needs to come off because you want to be able to see exactly what you're sewing. Of course, you could just eyeball it, but I prefer not to because it's just easier for me to get it accurate and just trim all this fringe off. You might probably have no fringe on your stuff, you know, but if you have another piece that's overlapping in any way, if this piece is overlapping on your denim in any way, you do want to trim it out. I've learned that as I went. Okay, so you can also use pins if you'd like to. Make sure that it doesn't move around on you. Like that, just a few to hold it in place. Again, you always want to check, see how that's overlapping right there. I'll have to go and trim that off because when it comes down time to sew it, I won't be able to see it exactly. And it just makes things a little bit easier. So I'm gonna flip it and try and trim it out as best I can. The sharper your scissors, the better. I need some new scissors, but I'm just using what I have. And you can do this at your house too. Use old jeans, old shirts you don't want anymore. I don't have a cutting board. We're just doing this by eye, okay? So what we're gonna do right here, I'm gonna place this at the very edge, and then you come over here to your stitching settings. I like to use a smaller, which I like a real thin line. So I put mine all the way on 0. And then I'm gonna come over here, because my sewing machine doesn't really want to move the fabric unless I'm at least on a 1. So I'm there on a 1 to make the stitching thin. Always line it up to the very edge of this right here. And so. So right when I started to show you guys, the bobbin ran out and I had to rethread it. That's what happens when you just make videos on the spur of the moment. Anyways, let's begin. Make sure that you're lined up here at the edge and keep it steady. When you come to the end, usually I stop before that. Lift up your, I don't know what this is called. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to back stitch so that I get to the right moment. And once you do that for a few times, you'll become experienced. That way you don't have to lift it all the way out. And then you just get your fabric situated again, right there. Always watch for your needles. It doesn't matter if it's a little off because that part's not going to be seen, hopefully. As long as you're still stitching on that top material. Again, you just do the same thing, turn it, check to see if you need to trim any. I think I could come over a little bit more. And then you just keep doing the same thing. Like that. Always go beyond this stitch right here, just as a good measure. And if you want, you can back stitch it. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, depending on the mood I'm in. Trim off your pieces. Oh, your threads, I mean, sorry. Okay, and so you see how it kind of comes up right there? That's what the X is for, just to keep it together better. And I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. Now, I do like to switch the stitching on the X because for me, it feels better to have a crisscross because it feels like it's working better. This I like to do, you know, it's just an outline to keep the fabric on the back end of this. So what I like to do is I like to put my number 2 and bring this over to almost to 2, like that. Bring the needle down. Again, this will not be a perfect X because I don't know how to make a perfect X. The way that your quilt is going to look if you do denim and plaids or different colors, okay, you're going to have a country look. So that's why it's okay if your X's aren't exactly in the center, because if it's going to be like a shabby chic country type look, or maybe even rustic. We'll go with rustic. Okay. Of course, I believe that the better you do it, the better it's going to look. But if you make a mistake, is what I'm trying to say, guys. If you do make a mistake, it's okay. Just run with it. Make it fun. Then I back stitch. About 3 times. There you go. And when I get to the center, I back stitch again, at least 3 times. Stop about the same area where you would up here. And my bobbins are doing something stupid, which is great. Not really, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to back stitch right here. In a weird way, I kind of like the way that looks. So I'll have to go back in there and redo that because it keeps wanting to come out. And then I'll just repeat the same thing going this way as best you can. So once you have what you'd like or a good start on your denims and plaids and solid colors that you've chosen for your quilt, you're going to want to lay it out and how you like it. So I usually do 9. I sew those together and then I do 9 more for a total of 18. But you might want to add one more. That's up to you because you'll be trimming it once you get the back on it. You'll always wind up trimming it probably. So let's see, start off with your yellow plaid piece. I'll do that. And always want to make sure you add your denim because it is a denim quilt. You could just completely take the denim out of it, omit it completely, and just do a quilt like this with all these things. But I like denim. And I also love to use white and black for bold contrast. See how that black looks against that pink gingham? Love gingham. It's one of my favorites. I'm learning that about myself. I like plaid, but I really like gingham a lot. So let's say I want to do these right here. I really like the way that looks. 2, 3, 4. Get that sewn together. Let's do a white one. Looks kind of nice. Do something like that. Put another piece of denim in here. So this quilt is different than the other one I made last year. Because I wanted to do brighter colors, more pastel. Believe it or not, I'm making it for my grandmother. How's that for a flip around? Instead of grandma making me a quilt, we're making her one. But she'll appreciate it, I'm sure. She's a sweet woman. I love her very dearly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And one more. There's 9. Put them together. And once you have it laid out and you sew them together, I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. You'll have something like this. All these pieces laid out together. This is 9. And then you sew these together, and then you'll attach just like the same way that you're doing this to this one. And then you'll have 18 long. And when that's done, you should have something like this. After you get them all stripped together, a long piece like that, right here. You can see how that's done right there. I sew, back stitch. When I get to the middle, I back stitch in the middle right there, and then I do it again right there. You should have something like this. Once all your strips are put together, and then that's your beginning of your top quilt. On the top of it. I'm trying to get it straightened out here for you to see. See that? Use pieces that mean something to you or not. Just use whatever you have around the house. And the reason why I wanted to tell you guys that we do it in strips is because it just makes the process easier for me anyway. I do it in strips, and then I put it like, I'll put 2 together, and then I'll put 2 more together. That way the process is easier. While you're quilting, the fabric will all get heavier, so you'll have to keep it bunched up, you know, on the table, and so it's not pulling on your sewing machine, and that it's easier for you to stitch it. Okay? And I'll go through all that with you. So we're going to start with these 2 pieces, and remember that you can pin it or not. Make sure that that's the underside of your denim, and that's not really what I want to do. I don't want to, you don't want to expose this is what I'm saying. So make sure that it's not like this, you know what I'm saying? When you open it, okay, I'll show you. Like that's the side that you want. So place it on top of there. I'm not going to use needles because I've been doing this for a while. I can pretty much just eyeball it and keep it together. Although it's probably better if you do, but like I said before, you do this for a while, you get a little experienced in it. Stick it right there. Your sewing machine. Don't go to the edge too. You want it in there because it'll get stuck if you don't. So bring your pressure foot down. Always bring your needle down into the fabric before you begin sewing. That's how I like to do it. I usually just keep this the same setting as I did, to zigzag the stitching, like the X's right there. I just keep it on the same setting when it comes time to make your strip and sew your squares together. And then make sure to always back stitch. Come over here, push that right there, or whatever you do on your sewing machine to back stitch. Then come in here in the middle, do it about 3 times, and when you get to the end of your square, do it again 3 times. And I'll show you that. Okay, so I've finished. What? And when you open it, you'll have your pieces together. Like that. And then repeat process. Come up here, put it right next to this. Always make sure that it's turned this way. Line it up and repeat. So this is the strip we just did. You put every square together and you should have something that looks like that. Now here's the other one that I'm going to attach it to. And remember what I said earlier about the end pieces, whatever you put together, whichever end you choose will be the center of the quilt. I like the way that looks a lot. I love those 2 colors together. Or I could take this and the denim, and that looks really good too. So it's really up to you what you want to do. I'm going to do this because I think that looks great. So we'll be sewing that together. Okay, so that's finished. And then the next step is to take this strip and sew it onto this one. Once you have as many strips as you want laid out, you can do as many as you want. I've done 3 here to demonstrate what I'm talking about. You lay them out and see how you want to put them. This right here, I don't like the way that looks. I don't want this right next to that, and I don't like this over here where there's all this denim clustered up. I'm kind of picky about stuff like that. So, just always mess around with it, play around with it. Also, these 2 are right side by side. It's like I did it on purpose and I didn't. So I'm gonna take this, maybe this one actually, the middle one. I'm gonna flip it around here and see if that looks better. And then that over here, I don't like the way that looks. So, mess around with it, play around with it, and get it situated how you want. And I have another issue with those 2 matching up. I'm gonna lay it over here, see if that's any better. Yep. Okay, so once you got this laid out and you have your strips done, you're going to want to lay out your middle piece that you've already finished, or what you have done, and just take this and lay it on the side to see if that's how you like the way it looks. Always lay it out. You can come up with many different combinations. But first, you do want to do that to make sure that you don't have exactly the same unless you want it that way. Like this right here turned out like that. A few times is okay. Too much of this, to me, looks repetitive. So I like to mess around with it. Once you have this laid out, you're going to want to sew it on here. I do recommend that you use pins for this. You're going to need pins for sure. Just do the best that you can and then go all the way down as much as you need. You're going to do it the same way that you put these squares together. Same stitching, zigzag. Okay, remember that as you're sewing, your quilt will get heavier as you go on. I'm not using a quilting foot or a walking foot. I don't even know what that's like. Maybe you have one, good for you, but we are sewing without one. So remember to keep it bunched up as you sew. That way you're not pulling on the needle. If it's feeling heavier to you, just pause, lift up your fabric, and keep it all together. Okay, there's gonna be a point where you come to this right here, this little notch. You pause the sewing machine if you need to. Lift this up, bring it down so that it's under the pressure foot, and then slowly go over it. It's okay to give it a little push, just a little nudge to help it out. It's an old sewing machine and I'm going slow for your guys' benefit. If it's a little faster, then it goes right through it. Make sure to back stitch it, and you have to, for real, do this one at least 3 times. That way it's strong in the notch. And then keep going. Oh my gosh, you guys. You won't believe what happened. So, as you can see, I'm using this vintage sewing machine. This belt right here got loose. Over time, I guess it's gonna do that. It's the original belt. And I went through a bunch of crap. I had to find the right size, which it was printed right here. So I ordered one and they only come from China. So I had to wait about a month for it to come in the mail. It still didn't fit right and I didn't know what to do. My dad, being the smart man he is, tells me to take this belt and soak it in rubbing alcohol and it'll shrink it. Guess what? I set it in rubbing alcohol overnight and it worked. It's tight again. I'm back in business. I use this Pirate's dish right here, filled it with alcohol. You don't want something too big, it's precious rubbing alcohol. And thank God this was a little bit after the whole toilet paper and rubbing alcohol scare, you know, where it was scarce in the stores. But I'm really thankful for that. And so I'm back in business. So, but if you use a vintage sewing machine and your belt gets loose, set it in rubbing alcohol overnight. You're back in business. Okay guys, now that I've got the top part finally finished, it's all done. You're going to want to put the backing on. And what I've used is a blanket. I'm just going to use another blanket. I'm not going to mess with the middle part or any of that. You know, this will be the middle part. This will be the backing and the middle all together in one. Like I said, we are using what we have. So if you don't have just a regular, you know, just a blanket around the house to use, what I did was I went to Goodwill. Again, this was way before the pandemic really happened, and I didn't know about it, but I just happened to have this project here and I thought you guys would enjoy it. I picked this one out right here. What we're going to do is I'm going to lay it out and I'm going to show you how to do that. Guys, you're going to want to lay it out with the colorful side facing you, all right? This is your jagged edge right here. There's always going to be a jagged edge, and then you're going to have more of a straight edge right there, all right? And then I'll show you how to put the backing on this. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you want the top part of your blanket, the pretty side, if you have one. This is pretty versatile actually, but right here, this is the top, and you're going to want to put the top of your blanket, the pretty side, on top of your quilt, like that, okay? With the back side's facing you, all right? All right. So you pin this before you trim it, okay? On the jagged edge, make sure to pin it first before trimming. And once you have your pins inside the fabric, we're going to start trimming. Just follow the line all the way down as close as you can without cutting the top, or the back, sorry. There we go. Just keep going. Okay guys, it's all pinned down. What you're gonna wanna do, of course, is sew it, but you're gonna leave one end open. I prefer to leave the more unperfect side open, but it really doesn't matter. I like to keep the straight edge alone, but again, it doesn't really matter. Just use what side that you feel more comfortable with, because you're going to pull the fabric out and you're going to have it, I'll show you all that. Okay, so once it's sewed, you're going to reverse it and kind of open it up. Guys, when you're sewing, always make sure that this piece right here, the underneath your quilt, is matched up right here. You don't want it way back here like that. So always make sure that the two pieces are right there, okay? Okay guys, I sewed all the way around, and what you want to do before you pull the fabric through is you want to make sure there's no needles left. Always look very carefully, make sure you get all the needles, because you don't want to take your quilt and then pull it through and then realize that you left some needles in there. So I left one end open, and the end that I left open, let me see, I found it right here. I left this end open. This is the end I was telling you guys about. It's shorter than all the others. The ugly end is what I call it. You're gonna open it up and just pull it through like this. Take it and then pull it through. What you're gonna do now that you've got it pulled, it's gonna be like a big pillowcase, okay? But you want to take these and sew them together. So both ends get curled under like that, and then you sew them together. And you're gonna pin them first. Okay, so we have it turned over each side and pinned all the way down like that. I'll let the piece of part of it open for you. Just show you how it's done. And then we get the sewing. And then we're not done yet. We're going to take some yarn and we're going to go on each square. Of course, I'm not going to show you each square, but we're going to pull the yarn through, because that, in my opinion, is what makes a quilt. Okay, so I finally got all of the edges done. One thing I did learn while doing this is, you're making a square top, you're going to want a square bottom, okay? Make a square bottom. Try to avoid curves, because it's very difficult unless you have a curved bottom as well. It's odd. And try to avoid lace. I have a few lace pieces and they get hung up in the, like, there was some like that that's flat, so that's okay, but I had some that was more hand stitched, and the pressure foot gets hung up in that, and it keeps your quilt from being sewn. So it's kind of tricky. You can use it, but be careful. We're fixing to put that on as ties. I picked out this real pretty silver stuff. You can't really see it. There you go, right there. That'll be, hopefully that'll be pretty. Okay guys, next to tie the patches with the knot and then with your ties. This is from my last quilt because I already finished it. You're gonna at least want to measure 17 inches approximate. You can guesstimate, okay, but at least make sure that it's around 17 inches. Cut it, and you're gonna want to use a thick needle with a big eye hole right there so you can make that. And then you're gonna stick it through there, and then like this. Make sure that it's even at the ends, and take it, go through the top, find the center, pull it through, and then go through the bottom, the top, like that. And then just tie it. You can cut it if you want, but do it 3 times and pull it tight. Like that, 3 times. 2 and 3. And then cut it. Make sure that they're even. You can trim it, you know. Make sure that they're all. There you go.